During my college days, I was staying in a college hostel. One day after having my dinner, I went to my room to study. I had my internal exam the next day, so I had to make sure I was ready. Our room was a 6-sharing, very spacious room with 2 bathrooms. That day, myself and 2 friends were the only ones there in the room. The other 3 cots were empty. My roommates were asleep by 10 p.m., but I was well awake into the midnight hours studying. I tried to go to sleep as best I could around 1 o'clock or so, but it was hard to really sleep properly in that kind of space. Just when I had begun to fall into a light slumber, something disturbed me. I got up and noticed it was around 2:30 a.m. or so. At first, I thought I had been disturbed by the sound of the fan. I could hear it spinning very slowly and making a lot of noise due to the low voltage. Other than that, there was perfect, total silence. Then though, I looked over and suddenly realized I was looking at a strange man sitting in the vacant cot of my room. I didn't know who this man was, and I'd never seen him before either. In my groggy state, I suddenly realized, what exactly was a man doing in a ladies-only hostel, and in my room at that? Needless to say, it was an extreme shock, and I began sweating profusely, totally terrified. I could only watch helplessly as I saw the stranger slowly getting up from the cot with a knife clearly visible in his hand. It looked like he was moving over to stab my friend, who was sleeping soundly in the other corner of the room. I tried to open my mouth to speak, but the only things that would come out were frightened squeaks as I tried to wake up my friend who was sleeping next to me. I really wanted someone else to wake up and help me, but my attempts all failed, and all I could do was shiver in place. As I saw the man moving closer to her, I jumped out of my bed suddenly, shouting, "Thief! Thief!" That woke my neighbor up right away. She got frightened and ran over and asked what had happened. I told her there was a thief on the other side of the room with a knife. She was also extremely scared, and we switched on the lights together. Well, nobody was there. We did find my friend sleeping soundly and getting extremely annoyed to be woken up. The other girl asked where he was. I told her he might have been hiding in the restroom or under the cot perhaps. So the 3 of us all searched for him together, but in the end, we couldn't find him. I don't know exactly what happened to him. Moreover, the door was still locked from the inside. The very next morning, my roommates had told all about the incident to all of my batchmates, and everybody made fun of me. But to this very day, I still can't exactly figure out what might have happened there. I don't know how he could have possibly escaped or gotten in even if the door was still locked. When everybody cleared the street and the shopkeepers suddenly shuttered up all their stores, well, that should have been a sign that something was really wrong that day in Guatemala City. I had just arrived the day before though, so I wasn't fully aware of political developments in Guatemala since the last time I'd visited. I was waiting for a bus in the downtown Zona 1. As a Peace Corps volunteer in neighboring Honduras, I was used to riding public transportation wherever I went in Central America. After I waited for more than 10 minutes without seeing a single bus pass by, I knew immediately something was wrong. I didn't have a clue as to what was about to unfold though. It was like the mood on the street had changed in an instant. Everybody rushed to pull down the steel curtains in front of their shops, and a few other pedestrians at the bus stop began to sprint for cover. I heard shouting coming from somewhere in the distance, and a moment later, a mob of more than 100 students appeared before me. They had completely taken over the street, marching and chanting slogans. They looked harmless in their school uniforms, the girls in plaid skirts, and the boys in white shirts and khakis, many of them even carrying book bags. One young man in the front, I thought he must have been an engineering student, was holding a large T-square. They all seemed so excited and pumped up with adrenaline. I thought it must be some kind of rally. Perhaps their team had just won a soccer tournament or something. Then though, a bus pulled in. The crowd of students surged around the bus, and I thought to myself, well, there goes my ride. The only bus I'd seen all morning, and these kids were going to shove their way on board in front of me. But those students did not want to ride the bus. I watched in amazement as the young man in front hacked out the windows with his T-square. The other students rushed inside and dragged out the driver and passengers. Then they set the bus on fire. It was so bizarre, it felt like I was dreaming. All of a sudden, these kids in their school uniforms were rioting in the street in front of me. For once, I broke down and paid a taxi to get me the hell out of there. I took the cab to Zona 10, the wealthy suburbs of the city, where I had a business meeting to attend. There, everything seemed calm and ordinary. I conducted my business for the next few hours until one of the staff informed us there was some bad trouble downtown. A public transportation rate hike had gone into effect that day, and the students were extremely angry. No one much seemed concerned, but the director of the project requisitioned a car and driver specifically to take me back to my hotel. In the comfortable remove of Zona 10, we all felt safe. No one there had any idea what I'd be returning to in downtown Zona 1. About a mile from the hotel, traffic had stopped completely. What had started as a student bus burning a few hours before had turned into a full-blown, violent, deadly riot. Numerous buildings were on fire. Grown men were looting stores and restaurants to the right and left in front of us. I looked ahead only to see them turning over cars with people still in them and setting them on fire as well. It was just a matter of time before they got to us. My driver could not move the car forwards or backwards at this point. He told me I had to go by foot. There was nothing else he could do. I was on my own from here. I stepped out of the car. The next thing I remember is somehow arriving at the hotel, just as the concierge was nailing the entrance shut with sheets of plywood. Somehow, I had managed to sprint for a mile through the center of the riot without retaining any memory of what happened to me. Between my departure from the car and arrival at the hotel, I totally blanked out, as in dissociative amnesia. Somehow, I managed to make it through alive. I don't know how I did or what happened on the way. Nothing at all. I do have vivid memories, impressions of a man carrying a cash register out of a fast food chicken place, a driver in front of us screaming and running from his car as rioters threw fire at it, stepping out of the car I was in, arriving at the hotel, the concierge hurriedly ushering me inside, with no other memories in between. I guess instinct alone must have gotten me through that horrible mess, but it wasn't telling me how I did it. That night, I watched from my hotel room terrified as light armor rolled through the streets of the capital city, accompanied by busloads of troops and militia, gun-mounted pickup trucks pouring into town to quell this uprising. The militia in their homemade technicals were the worst, because I knew they were outside the law, with free reign to kill and terrorize anyone they wanted. I was so dissociated through the sheer intensity of these events that I don't think I was actually ever scared. It was like being on a super fake Disney ride or something. Pirates of the Caribbean Central American riot version. The parts I remember at least. The riot wasn't the scariest part though. There are no emotions of any kind associated with that event itself. It's the aftermath that really got to me. All my emotional trauma centers on the violent repression that seemed sure to follow this. The armored cars and technicals arriving on the scene by night to round up, torture, kill, and disappear the opposition. That's what really bothered me. That's the part I really felt once I was safe hidden away in my hotel room. Those were bad times in Central America, and it's still bad, from what I hear. So one day, I ordered a ride-sharing car at almost 12 midnight after partying a bit. I'd gotten a little bit drunk, but not enough to where I couldn't think straight. Immediately as the car pulled up, I noticed it looked quite weird. Its car license number was different from what was written on the app too. When it arrived, the driver offered me shotgun, the front passenger seat, instead of offering the back. I tried to open the back seat door, only to find it was shut closed. It wouldn't open no matter what I tried. The driver said the back door was broken, so he insisted I sit at the front. My biggest weakness is that I tend to trust people too quickly, which makes me a little bit reckless sometimes. Therefore, I innocently trusted the driver and was about to sit in the front. At that moment though, as I took one step into the car, I noticed the silhouette of a man wearing a mask in the back seat. Well, instantly that set off alarm bells. I sensed that something was not right here, and I almost shit my pants. At that moment, I realized that this driver was at the very least trying to rob me. Speaking of robbery, there was a popular report on the newspaper about passengers of ride-sharing or taxi services getting robbed and killed by these shadow drivers. These shadow drivers would clone a real driver's phone or pretend to be a taxi and intercept orders late at night. The method was the same as what almost happened to me. The passenger would be asked to sit at the front, and someone hiding from behind would smother you until you passed out. They'd usually target young women to be robbed, raped, and killed. Nonetheless, they'd rob anyone who seemed incautious or reckless enough, especially those who looked drunk or in a hurry. Snapping back into the moment, the driver casually asked me, "Well, why are you still standing there? Come on in." I guess in the darkness he didn't realize my pale, almost scared to death face. I replied instantly, "Well, who's that in the back?" I pulled my leg back from the car, pointing to the silhouette of the man in the back seat. It seemed the shadow driver realized his cover had been blown. He shut the door quickly and drove off right away. I've been living in Jakarta for most of my life, and I've never been robbed ever, even from being pickpocketed. That was the closest moment I'd ever come to me being robbed. Now let me start this off by saying I look very young. Common bets usually range from 15 to 18 years old. When I don't put makeup on, several waiters have even handed me the kids menu before. Really, I'm not kidding. On to the point in question though. I'd been studying abroad in Florence for a couple of months and had taken a weekend off to visit Naples by myself. It had all been pretty great so far. Nice gelato, a trip to some good museums, lots of good food, and a really nice hotel. That is, until I decided to go visit the Castel dell'Ovo, the castle of the egg literally. I was taking pictures of the site while still on the jetty, when I noticed a man seemed to be staring at me. Okay, not so big a deal. He was about 5 meters away or so. Almost as if in a cartoon though, he started to slide towards me very slowly. I kept on taking pictures, trying to ignore it. He finally approached me though, and started speaking in an incomprehensible Italian. He seemed shy and was talking extremely softly. I walked up to him and craned my neck towards him, because I literally could not hear a single thing he was saying. Again, he seemed very shy, so my wariness decreased a bit. I later understood though that he was speaking in that volume on purpose, so I would step even closer. I was hell-bent on going home speaking a somewhat fluent Italian, so I decided I was going to do my best to try and speak with this man. Hindsight is 20/20. Halfway through our conversation, I understood he was talking in the dialect of the region, so our soft exchange of incomprehensible Spanish, English, Italian, French was going nowhere. I still had some stuff to do, so I decided to cut it off there. I mumbled out a goodbye and said I had to go somewhere else. I had an essay to do or something. The man suddenly jerked up immediately, and his whole body language changed in an instant. "How old are you?" This was asked with a whole different tone and in perfect, crystal clear English. He'd gone from this timid Italian man who kept looking away into the sea, hands in pockets, to a guy who was suddenly way taller than me. He was staring at me with such intensity that it made me take a few steps back. Why had I stepped back so fast? I was suddenly very scared. I pointed to a random guy in a red hoodie nearby and said, "Hey, that's my brother. I gotta go catch up with him now." I sprinted away. I was suddenly very conscious of my ponytails, my purple jacket, my face without makeup, and of my height. I must have looked like 14 years old. I was also suddenly conscious of being alone. That hadn't really happened until that point. I rushed into the Castel dell'Ovo and started taking pictures of the place to calm myself down. Relax, there's people here. It's just a weird guy, right? I thought I was safe since I hadn't seen him following, but unbeknownst to me, he had followed me. I really wanted to enjoy my holiday and was reading the signs, walking slowly, taking pictures of the scenery. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake this feeling of uneasiness. Every time I'd heard the phrase before, I felt like I was being watched. I'd always done this same shoulder shrug. It's not like human beings have a sixth sense or whatever, right? We ain't a deer in the wild or something. But this was the first time I realized that this was a true, totally legitimate feeling. I couldn't take a single picture without looking over my shoulder now. I was searching for a face I desperately did not want to find there. I didn't notice him until an hour had passed by, and I was nearly at the top of the castle. I snapped a photo, watched my camera's monitor, turned around, and lo and behold, there he was. He was barely peeking from behind a wall, as if he thought we were in a noir movie or something. He was pretending he was not taking pictures of me. I stared at the man, now obviously caught. He stared back at me. He raised his cell phone once more, and this time snapped a picture fully in view. Then he stepped back into the hallway out of my sight. As cliché as it may be, I instantly felt a cold chill run down my spine. I really wanted to enjoy this sight and this day, but I found myself tripping over my own feet escaping from that castle, half wondering why I was going so fast, and half wondering if he was still there behind me. Sure enough, he was, not even hiding now. He was keeping pace with me. He was seriously just chasing behind me, moving almost like a snake in between other tourists, walking really fast now. I had never felt like a deer before. I'd always thought I would be a rational person that in a moment of panic would stop, analyze all my options, and devise a perfect plan. I didn't realize how hard that was to do though, until I was so scared I couldn't figure anything out. I was out of the castle and on the streets now, and I couldn't hear a single thought over the sound of my own heart. I remember I kept calling out my mom's name like a broken record, wondering what the hell I should do. I went down a couple of random side streets. I lost track of him and got lost myself like an idiot. I'm the worst at directions. Finally though, I entered a shop and checked Google Maps and found my way back to where I was supposed to go. He must have followed me for a good additional 20 minutes. Add to that the whole hour I'd spent at the castle. Needless to say, I did not stop moving until I reached my hotel once again. I hated it. I hated that I didn't leave the hotel until the next morning. I hated this dizzy feeling in my head, and I hated that I didn't have the courage to tell my boyfriend until months later. It's not like he really could have done anything anyway, he wasn't there with me. But I always go back to that man and his voice asking how old I was. Why was that relevant? And why had he sounded so mad asking about my age? Strangers have kept following me since. After all, I have the bad habit of traveling alone while looking very young. But since then, I've learned to stop and think when some random person approaches me. I remember I was walking down the street in my old neighborhood in Baltimore when all of a sudden I got this really uneasy feeling. I looked up and down the street and could see through to the main street as well. There were lots of alleyways in between though. I looked to the right, then to the left. I couldn't see anything at all to be afraid of, but I was still feeling it. I remember I was about to take a step forward into an alleyway when I swear to you, I heard a voice inside my head saying with complete urgency, "Stop, turn around and go the other way now." So that's what I did. I turned around and sprinted the other way. That night, I remember I kept hearing sirens from police cars all over, and I was really uneasy, double-checking all the door locks, the window locks. I called all of my family to make sure they were all right as well. Everyone was saying they were hearing these sirens all night too, so I knew it wasn't just me. I told my mom I'd had that uneasy feeling coming home that night, and I was still in fact feeling pretty on edge. I told her I'd called the family and everyone seemed fine, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. She had heard the sirens too, of course, and told me to just stay inside. She was there with me after all, so she wouldn't let anything bad happen to me. I tried my best to relax. The next morning, my mom and I were watching the news when the reporter was saying there had been a brutal rape and murder on that very same street. In fact, the very same block I'd had such an uneasy feeling on the night before. I lost my mind, and instantly I started tearing up. I started telling my mom that was where I'd felt that feeling. That girl could have easily been me had I not listened to that voice in my head. My mom started to cry too. It was all a horrible mess. I'm glad I listened to my voice that night, or I wouldn't be here now telling you about this. I guess maybe I noticed something subconsciously that set me off. When I was a kid, Halloween was a fun holiday. No one was putting razor blades in candy or handing out candy-shaped fentanyl yet. We roamed all over town without a tremble amongst us. We were a group of 4, a brother and sister, and me and my sister. I was dressed as a bum, my sister as a baggy-dressed school marm. The other girl was dressed as Robin Hood and her brother as a monk. She was about 10 years old. Her brother and I 11, and my sister 8. We just stopped at this big house, and I realized there was a grown-up party going on. They were all laughing and talking, but I noticed that all of them were men. Well, when they noticed us trick-or-treating, one of them seemed very taken in with Robin Hood. They had given us some good candy and made us tell what we were dressed as. This wasn't really unusual. Grown-ups were in charge no matter if you knew them or not, at least back then. The man seemed to want to take pictures of the girl dressed as Robin Hood in another room with better lighting. Well, I told him, okay, then we'll all go. You can take all of our pictures. But he insisted not. He wanted only Robin to go inside. My hackles rose up immediately, and my hair stood on end. I grabbed Robin's hand tight, and my sister's hand as well. I plowed through all the men between me and the door. I ran out, holding my sister's hand and letting go of the other girl. It seemed Robin wanted to go back. She liked the attention. I was in charge of the group though, and I told that brother and sister I was going straight to their mom if they went back inside. I liked their mom a lot, but she could be a real terror when she was angry. Needless to say, they came with me willingly, griping all the way. I took them home first, and then I told their mother what had happened. I told their mom where the house was as well. She cussed and told us to go home, so I did so. I don't know if anything else really came out of it in the end, but those men were wrong, and I know they wanted more than just pictures.